All right, thanks everyone for joining. This is our Wednesday night meeting, a monthly meeting of the Amherst Security Group. My name is Robert Hurlbut, and this is a group that's been around now for, we just celebrated our 10 years late last year in 2024. This is April 17th, 2025. And tonight we have special guests with us. He's joined us before. Dick Brooks is going to be speaking on some of his experiences with some of the European regulations and other things that are really interesting, as he always does. Very interesting topics and his experiences. And so, really appreciate joining us tonight and opportunity to do this online. So the video will be available as well. I'll turn it over to you, Dick. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you, Robert. Yeah, Dick Brooks with Business Cyber Guardian, and I'm primarily a lurker over there on the EU CRA side. It's being an American, it's not really going to influence us a whole lot or impact us a whole lot. But if you do have products that you sell to the EU marketplace, this is something that you may need to at least pay some attention to. But I'm also happy to introduce a colleague who's on those same calls, Vicky Risk. Vicky, you want to say hello to everyone? You're muted, Vicky.
Well, I think people get the hi even.
Yeah. So, so if I say something wrong about the CRA, you can correct me, okay, Vicky, because you're there all the time as well. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit, guys. I'm gonna use an existing FAQ that comes from OpenSSF because they did such a great job. There's just no reason for me to reinvent the wheel. So I'm gonna use what they did. So can you guys see that okay? Does the EU CRA affect my business? Okay, okay, go. So let's just start off at the very beginning and just talk about what it is. So first off, I'll bring your attention to the introduction section. And so the EU CRA is an actual piece of legislation, means it's a regulation. It has the full force and power of the European Union's European Commission. It affects all of the countries within the EU and the EEA, which is a little bit extended. It includes EEA, includes guys like Iceland and I think Norway. But it went into effect on the 10th of December, and it has a staggered implementation timeline. This year, there are deliverables due in December of the actual technical standards that will be used to guide what will ultimately be the conformance requirements for the EU CRA. And so those are still under development. It's a very short fuse when you consider what needs to be done and when it all goes into effect, which is really, I think it's December 2027 is when the final bell rings. Everyone has to be implemented by that time. So it really addresses cybersecurity requirements with regard to essentially digital products, but really any piece of any product that has what they call a PDE, a piece of call it data. Hang on a second, guys. It's down here a little bit. Let me go down here. Oh, products with digital elements. That's what it is. Products with digital elements. So the EUA affects you if you create any products with digital elements in it. So the first thing you're going to want to know is, are you affected? So if you are an organization that produces products for the European market, for sale on the European market, chances are quite good you're going to be classified as a manufacturer within the context of the regulations. And so manufacturers have the heaviest lift. They have the they have the requirements, and they also have the fines, and they have the need to comply with the law over time. So they have the heaviest lift. So, so the first question you really want to ask is, if you're an American company and you are selling your products into the European Union, and those products contain which are known as products with digital elements, then chances are quite good you're going to be subject to the EU CRA. What's a little interesting about the law is it also includes any remote services that your applications or products rely on. Like in my case, our product has a server component. We have APIs that we rely on. And so our system would be subject to both the EU CRA as a client-side component application, as well as the server-side APIs as well. So it includes both. So it's really kind of important to keep that in mind, that it is going to address both the application that you put on the ground in the EU, as well as any that are online. Even here in the US, they will be under that law. So if you produce a PDA, you are likely to be what's known as a manufacturer. This is a really key concept. Manufacturers, as I said, have all the requirement expectations placed on them. There are also some pretty hefty fines that go along with it. So, moving on just a little bit. So, do you do business in Europe? So, if your product is sold or offered in the EU, or you make a profit on it in some way from the EU, then this means you're likely subject to the CRA. Now, one thing that people do ask is, well, what about open source products? And sure enough, open source products have some potential products that are subject to certain EU CRA requirements, but not all. So if you are what's known as an open source steward, so an organization like the Linux Foundation is a great example. They are responsible for maintaining open source products. So they would be classified as an open source software steward. And there's it's a much lighter level of expectations on the stewards, but they still have to, be responsible for certain requirements along in order to conform with the law itself. I don't know what the fines are exactly for the stewards. I suspect it's significantly less than the manufacturers. My company is considered a steward for the one open source product that we have. And so we are concerned about what we need to do in order to ensure that we're covered in order to provide that product, that open source product, into the EU. So as you can see, there are a lot fewer and less onerous requirements on stewards than on manufacturers. So the EU CRA is also aware of the role that maintainers and contributors play as well. So if you're a guy or a gal that sits at home and develops software as a hobby, and you place it into GitHub or in one of the repositories like PyPy or Maven or one of those guys, then you're not making money on that, you're just putting it out there as a tool for others to use, then you are exempted from the EU CRA. So that was the good news. Initially, there were some concerns about what would happen with open source developers and their products, and fortunately, they are off the hook. But if you're a steward, like my company is, then you will have some obligations. And Vicky, I don't know what you guys are thinking. Would you be considered stewards in your role?
No, we're a manufacturer. So one of the key concepts here is place on the market. And in the EU, if you're taking money that is associated with the product, and there've been a lot of discussions with the people on the commission about how to interpret this. It also kind of pulls in the Blue Book, which is another existing piece of, long-term legislation around commerce in the EU. But if you place it on the market in the EU, then you're a manufacturer. And we're a nonprofit, so we don't actually make a profit, but we support the open source by selling technical support. And we have asked and been explicitly told by people who drafted this that that does constitute placing it on the market. even though in the language it says make a profit, very unclear that if you're nonprofit, that somehow gives you an out. And
Hmm.
all of this is untested and it's fairly vague. So
Hmm.
probably one of the main reasons that people are so alarmed about this is it's really hard. You can just parse the words all you want. It's hard to get a very clear answers to a lot of specific questions about definition. I mean, Dick is trying to simplify it and say this is what we think, but the reason every document you read about this says at the top this is not legal advice is because nobody really knows until it actually comes into force. There are also special categories of applications. And Dick, are you going to talk about that or not?
I am, Vicky, but I appreciate you going there because that's going to come up in the next couple of pages here. So thank you for doing it. And would you just let people know who you work for so that they'll understand where you're coming from?
I work for a small nonprofit. We've been around since 1984, so we're one of the oldest open source companies out there. And we produce some open source that is fairly critical for the internet infrastructure. Um, it's not end user software. It's something that is used by, large networks, service providers, that sort of thing. Um, in general, I think that the CRA was drafted by people who were reacting to concerns about consumer products like baby cameras, nanny cams, that might have been infected, and they just sort of expanded it to include all software. So there are a lot of provisions in here about, right to repair kind of concepts, updating, patching, uh, abandonware. Um, but it's really trying to span the whole gamut from, toaster ovens to like I said, core internet software. So that makes it even more complicated. Anyway, I will just
Yeah.
let you get
And
on.
if I'm not mistaken, I think you are the guys who actually bring us DNS, correct?
We have the initial original implementation of DNS, the by9 DNS system, but there are several other very good open source implementations. Mostly these have been created on purpose in order to have some heterogeneity and have some choices in the market.
Okay. So it's good to have your perspective here because, as you said, your company's been around a long time, and you also provide products over in the EU marketplace. So your perspectives are very valuable here. So moving on, guys, I'm going to keep going. Thank you, Vicky, and I'm going to keep on rolling. And there is a little bit of information. This deck that I'm showing you, this document is available online. I have that listed at the bottom of the presentation that I'll be returning to shortly. But this was available to you, so you don't have to write any of this down. It's going to be there. So the next question is, and this is one I know I had a very deep interest in, is what will my business need to do for the EUCRA? And I already know that we have a commercial product that would be subject to the EU-CRA if we do put it on the market in the EU. We haven't made that decision yet. But if we do, then we would take on the role of a manufacturer. We do make our open source product available in the EU. And so we do know that we are going to be classified or considered an open source steward. So we're very interested in knowing what's involved, what's expected of an open source steward with regard to the EU-CRA. So there's two real key concepts with regard to this. One is compliance and the other is conformity. So conformity is really that you are satisfying the expectations of the EU-CRA. And there are certain things here that you're going to see that go in there. For example, if you do anything, if you have a product that you're offering on the market, you will need to provide an SBOM, software bill of materials. If you And if that product with digital elements is available, you will also need to provide other information about vulnerability management and what your organization does to ensure that you are able to receive vulnerability reports, uh, confirm the vulnerabilities or process them, and then once confirmed, communicate information to consumers or to the public about any confirmed vulnerabilities that your products may have. So, so with regard to conformance, it's being able to produce those materials and providing those to the commission, the EU's commission. And I think actually ANISA is going to be the collector of these materials. Uh, and then with regard to compliance, it means that you do the ongoing business or work of staying on track with the EU CRA, which means you're monitoring for vulnerabilities, you're reporting vulnerabilities, you are releasing patches as necessary. So compliance means you're actually doing all the expected work over time to ensure that you stay compliant with the law. So one of the things that people will look for is this what they call a CE mark, and I looked for what CE meant. I looked even in the EU CRA itself, and they don't really describe the acronym CE. But what it is basically it's like almost like the UL mark that you might see, or the marks on packages to indicate that someone has passed some certification. That's what the CE mark is for, is to let people know when they look at a product, whether it's online or in a packaging somewhere in like a store, that it has passed the EU CRA conformance, and then they're able to display that mark. So that's how people will know if indeed a product is conformant to the EU CRA. So this is where it starts to get a little thick, and this is where I think Vicky was really heading here, is that they have different types of products. And we're going to get into that in just a second here. So I already talked about what compliance measures are. So they have different categories of PDEs. And for example, they have one category called important PDEs. And these are products that have a high risk and that they might have a negative impact on health, security, or safety of users if they malfunction or were compromised in some way. So there are two categories of these important PDEs, Class 1 and Class 2. And if you'd like to know the details of which products fall into which category, that's spelled out, as you can see in the EU CRA under Annex 3. And so important PDEs include things like operating systems and routers and health monitoring wearables, browsers, virus scanners, and baby monitors. So if you really need to know which products you will be offering, there are different requirements associated with this. So if you're considered a critical PDE, you would actually be expected to have a certification performed by a third party. But important PDEs, like my product, for example, it's not really life critical, but it is on the market. It's available. People can use it. If it was compromised, it could cause some irritation to people. But it doesn't reach the level of a Class 2 where it has to really has to go through any kind of certification. So my company can do a self-certification, and that's where we just simply provide the materials that are required, like the SBOM. And I'm going to show you these in just a minute. Vulnerability reporting and other information that is expected as an open source steward. Critical PDEs are listed in Annex 4 of the CRA, and these get into some other areas, like, for example, smart electricity meters or smart cards. It's not entirely clear to me what the actual criteria is that differentiates the criticals and the importance types of PDEs, but you have to really look at the CRA in order to understand what the different what the products are that fall into each of these.
So
We of
Dick,
course.
if I
Oh,
could
go ahead, Vicky.
just chime in with a comment. So the requirements are really, the security requirements are really the same for all these products. The difference is whether you can self-certify or whether you have to pay an auditor to come in and, with their checklist,
Yeah.
like an ISO process, and look at your artifacts and your proof and, have you saved your test results and all that stuff. And a lot of the concern is about the cost of this, because they say every time you update your product, you have to recertify it. And one thing that is not very clear, if it's a software only product, does that mean if you do monthly releases, you have to do this every month? And
Mm-hmm.
there's some comment about using semantic versioning for your
Mm-hmm.
software versioning, and
Mm-hmm.
that maybe it's only major versions, but again, it's one of those things which is not very clear. But
Mm-hmm.
actual security requirements themselves are mostly not super onerous. There are
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things that you would say are best practices. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I will say, for certain categories of products, the length of support that they're looking for, as I recall, it's like 5 years of patches. So for a very low-end consumer product, that's unusual. But otherwise, you know, a product that has a decent security posture, it's not going to be hard to meet the requirements. It might be hard to meet the, uh, I don't know, paperwork requirements, proving that you're doing this. But this is, it's not like a really high bar. They're not like advancing the state of the art or anything. It's more like trying to set a baseline.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I
in that
completely.
respect, if your product is halfway, well tested and you have a decent security posture, it's not that scary. It's just the idea that you have to prove it to somebody. And by the way, you mentioned it's like a UL mark. So you literally have to commit a PDF with the CE letters in the right font in your software. I mean, it's like you have to put a sticker on it, even if it's
Yep.
not a physical product. But anyhow,
Yep. No, spot on, Vicky. Thank you for clarifying. And that's some of, like you said, the actual requirements for self-certification are not onerous. I'm going to show them what we think are the minimum requirements for this as an open source software steward. And again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a software engineer. But what I'm sharing with you is information that we think is going to be satisfactory, but we haven't run this by any lawyers in the European Commission yet to say, yes, you get the gold star on your forehead. So we're still hoping to see what that is. And of course, we won't know until the technical standards are finally released, and they call them harmonized technical standards in the EU, which are expected to be completed and available this December. So, but thank you, Vicky. Thanks for pointing that out. And then, of course, if you're open source, if you're just a contributor and a maintainer, you don't have to really worry a whole lot about the expectations for conformance. You can if you want, but you really don't have to in many cases if you're just an open source contributor. Uh, but if you really want to know the answer about whether or not your product falls under the EU CRA requirements and whether it needs to be certified by a third party or it can be self-certified, the best thing to do is get a lawyer and go into the EU CRA and have them advise you based on what's in the annex. So heading back down here into compliance measures, as I said, you do have the conformance expectations, which you're doing the risk assessment up front. You're proving that you have no vulnerabilities in the product when you put it on the market. So that's one of the conformance requirements. But ongoing, you also have to provide other information like SBOMs, and that's part of the compliance measures as well. So you got both your conformance requirements, and then your compliance requirements over time that you'll need to be considering and actually fulfilling. So, for example, like I said, vulnerability status at release time, that's one of the conformance requirements. You got to be able to show there are no known exploitable vulnerabilities in your product. You got to be able to show that you have a coordinated vulnerability program in place. You also need to be prepared to issue any warnings or issue a notification if, in fact, you do become aware of a vulnerability, an actively exploited vulnerability. There are some reporting requirements that go along with that as well. So you also have to be able to provide free security updates, and that's what Vicky was saying earlier. That's 5 years, 5-year commitment to provide those. So it's not onerous, but it is, you have to be prepared to make the commitment in order to remain compliant and conformant to the EU CRA. So that's a high level. Now I want to show you what we think is going to be essentially what represents a set of expected documentation. But before I do that, let me just show you the law itself. So Annex 1, can you guys see Annex 1 right now? Is that showing?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, thanks. So Annex 1 is really all of the conformance related items and compliance related items that you need to be aware of. And it's not a lot. As you can see, it's a little over a page. And like Vicky said, they're primarily just common sense. You have to be able to do coordinated vulnerability disclosure as an example. Hold on a second, guys. I'm getting some background noise. Joanne, I'm getting some background noise. Sorry, guys. But you can just go to this, and I have links to this in the presentation as well. But you can go to the annex. That's where you really want to look. Is in the annex. It has the details of what's expected of you, what classification the products are. Here are the important products with digital elements, critical products with digital elements. So if you really want to know, you got to go into the actual text of the law itself to see where you fall in regards to these products. One thing I also want to point out is that Vicky and I are working together on some open source initiatives, and we have this group, this organization called the EU CRA Expert Group, and two of the entities that we are working with are the Eclipse Foundation. They're one of the expert groups, and then OpenSSF is also there as well as an expert group. And so these are the two that I'm involved with. I participate in their works and their meetings, I should say. But you can see who the other EU CRA experts are. Typical ones like Cisco and Microsoft are in here, and a few that we'll recognize as well. Siemens, which you would expect, is also in there. The Apache Foundation is pretty much working alongside the Eclipse Foundation as part of that effort, but they are also considered an EU CRA expert. So let me show you what we think is going to be a satisfactory solution for meeting the EU CRA conformance requirements. So I'm going to go over here, and then I'm going to go down into, let's see here, I'll put this down for just a second. Okay, I'm going to go in. So this is the documentation for our open source product that we make available in the EU. This is called the CISA SAG Reader. So CISA is an organization that I've worked with to produce some secure by design and secure by default best practices. And they have a buyer's guide that the US government uses to evaluate products to ensure that they are following secure by design and secure by default. expectations or requirements. And so there's a spreadsheet that's used to communicate that information from the vendor to the government, showing them that they are indeed doing what's expected. And the CISA SAG reader tool is, well, it eliminates the need to have Excel. It's a Python application. But what it does is it allows you to process batches of these spreadsheets so that you can just cycle through without having to pop around tabs in Excel. You just review them and approve each one of them as you go through. So you can process them pretty quickly. So here are the items that we think, these are the artifacts we think will be expected in terms of EU CRA conformance. So the first one you see is the software bill of materials. And so I'll click on that so you can see, but basically this is you're going to see that's an SPDX SBOM for this product. And you can see what it contains. It lists each and every component, gives you license information, but it lists the components and the licensing for each of the components. So all of that needs to be spelled out. So as part of the SBOM that you deliver to the EU CRA. There's still some question on what the minimum element requirements will be for SBOMs. They may or may not need the licensed material, not sure yet, but we're not taking chances. We're just going to throw it in there into the SBOM, and that way it's there if they need it. The other one, remember I talked about vulnerability disclosures. You need to show that your product has no vulnerabilities when it's released to market. So here is a vulnerability disclosure report that we produce. It's based on the NIST standards under SP 800-161. And what it shows is it shows all the information about the product, and it shows information about when the product was released and when this vulnerability disclosure was produced. So you can see we just did that very recently. You need to do this on a regular basis to be able to show that you have no vulnerabilities. And then you list the components, and if there are any vulnerabilities, they would show up here. See, they're all 0. But if there was a vulnerability, it would show up underneath here, and we would have to explain, in that case, what the impact is. Many times they're just false positives. So it's pretty simple. You just have to state this is a false positive. It's produced by the NIST NVD, but it doesn't really affect us because that's a Java CVE, and we don't do Java. This is Python, so clear. And so one other item that we produce is a vendor response form, and this is to provide information, other information that's not in an SBOM. So things like company information, like financial data and cybersecurity policies. These are important, at least from the U.S. government perspective, that companies show what they're doing in order to pass a risk assessment within the U.S. government. So we provide those as well. One other piece of information, a couple of other pieces of information that also are important are commercial status and support status. Parties will want to know, what risks they have with regard to the commercial status and support. So like in the case of Windows 7, it's no longer supported. You can still get it, but it's not supported. And the same will be true for Windows 10 at the end of this year. It'll be available, but it won't be supported, which means you're not going to get patch updates. So that's what we include in the vendor response form. And again, this is our speculation of what we think we need to provide to the European Commission in order to satisfy the EU CRA. Here's the CISA SAG spreadsheet that I mentioned to you. I won't go into that because it's a boring document in Excel. But one other document that we also believe will be needed is and this goes to the attestation or conformance requirement, is a secure software attestation form. And in the case of the US, if you're working with the US government, you have to supply one of these now. And it has very specific expectations And this is what we're anticipating with the EU CRA, that they will do something similar, where they will say, you need to show that you actually, producing the software securely, that you are monitoring for vulnerabilities, that you have a vulnerability disclosure program. We do. So you can see these are all yes. And then you go through, and this is just in the US, guys. What I'm showing you here is US only. So if you're dealing with the US government, you will need to produce an attestation form like what I'm showing you here.
Hey,
But we're
Dick,
anticipating, yes, Vicky,
I just want to throw in a comment. I mean,
go
I
for it.
don't know what the interest or the level of interest is of the different people on the call, but this is this is qualitatively very different than the CRA. So this attestation form, it's like export control in that this carries criminal penalties if you knowingly misstate.
Right.
So anyway, this is no joke, this thing. Just want to mention that. It has to be signed by the CEO or their someone that they have delegated to, and it carries criminal penalties just like exporting technology that is not um permitted to be that is controlled. So anyhow, it's
That is an excellent point, Vicky. What
not
I'm
just a
showing,
fine.
no, it's a really good point, because no one has said on the EU CRA side that we need to produce this attestation document yet. Those I suspect we're going to see coming when the technical standards are flushed out. This is a US document, and Vicky is exactly right. If you are not careful, you could be in violation of what's called the False Claims Act here in the US, which is this is no joke. You really got to take this seriously. And so you don't want to be on the wrong side of the False Claim Act. That can get you in some deep doo-doo. So you do have to be very honest when you do this, at least in the US, and I expect we'll see something similar with coming from the EU CRA as well. But let me do that now. Hold on a second, guys. So I'm gonna just go back here and bring you back to where I showed you. So we think this is our speculation, okay? This is our speculation that you may have to have. Well, this one's not so hard of a speculation or conjecture. Is that the SBOM and the VDR are pretty much spelled out as something you're going to need to do with the EU CRA. They spell that right out in the requirements in the annex. But we don't know about the VRF in the spreadsheet. Not sure if they'll have something similar. I suspect they will. The attestation, I suspect when it comes to the self-attestation, we should expect something along those lines as well, coming out of the EU CRA. What I'm showing you here is US stuff right here, right? But these are in force today. And then lastly, they have this concept of a conformance report that you will need to make available. And let me see here. Oh yeah, it's right here. They call it a final risk assessment report that you need to make available as part of the EU CRA. So you need to be able to produce this final risk assessment report if required to. So I'm probably at this point, I'm probably putting everyone to sleep. So I'm going to get out of that. I'm going to get out of that, and I'm going to go back to the presentation. So I've shown you the FAQ with the yellow highlighting of the various language in the, from the Open SSF. I showed you the CISA SAG reader example. This is our speculation. This is what we think we need to produce, need to produce to be EU CRA conformant. And this presentation is actually available. I think Robert's going to give you the link to it, but it's over on GitHub. If you really want to see the actual source document that I used, that was all highlighted with the frequently asked question, that's this guy right here. I'll give you a link to the full EU CRA text and the annex requirements that are listed at the bottom, go into the nitty-gritty detail of what's expected. Again, not onerous, but it definitely got to cross the T's and dot the I's. And lastly, I give you a link to the experts group. So if you did want to reach out to someone who's influencing what's going on over there, you could reach out to someone in that group. And with that, Robert, how did I do on time? Am I okay?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Some reason my phone just died, so I don't know where I stand here. But I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop sharing. Let me see. Is there this? I see there's something going on over in the chat over there. Is there any? Are there
Yeah,
any?
I just put the link. So I think that is what you were sharing, a PDF that you shared
Yeah,
with me earlier.
yeah, and you can put the PPT as well. That's the one that has all the links
Okay.
at the bottom, the resources.
Oh, yes, I see.
Yeah,
All right,
so
we'll do
put
that
both
as
of
well.
those there. And
Okay.
I put those in the example repository, which shows that what we think are going to be the kind of artifacts that people will need to produce in order to be conformant with the EU CRA. Again, this is speculation, guys. It's conjecture by us, but it's based on what we see in the EU CRA text itself, uh, and it's our speculation on what might be going forward. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going
I,
to come back, and I'm going to field any questions.
any questions?
Wow. Okay. I either put you all to sleep or I thoroughly confused everyone.
Or you convinced us?
Well, right, as I said, we're not going to know anything for certain until December of this year when the standards are finally announced. And even then, we still have to wait and see what comes after that with regard to the specific milestones that have been laid out by the EU Commission uh, for what we have to do to conform to the EU CRA. And there are people who really are very concerned about it, and for good reason. If you're a manufacturer and you sell $2 billion worth of goods in the EU, and you could end up being subject to a fine if you trip up on some of these requirements. It could be costly. I think it's like 15 million euro a day or something like that. Vicky, do you know what the fines are?
I don't remember it. I work for a nonprofit. We don't have any money, so I'm not as worried about the monetary fines. They can fine us all they like and they won't get much. But uh, another thing that's happening in parallel with the CRA, which is a lot scarier actually than the CRA, is they are updating or have updated the product liability law for EU. And so previously, software did not carry legal liability. You could put those little statements, you know, without warranted for any specific use, blah, blah, blah. Everybody puts in their products. And you couldn't be sued. But now, software explicitly is included as something that has a liability. So there's a lot of concern about things like, I mean, we all see, the blinking monitors in the airplane that's supposed to show the movies, and then some Windows thing that's crashed or something. You know, there is software in everything. The software in cars, the software in these cheap consumer devices
Yeah.
you buy, is software that the manufacturer scraped up off the internet somewhere and threw in there. They don't have any relationship with whoever wrote it. They don't have any ability to provide patches. You know, they barely can provide the provenance of where it came from. And so it's going to be exciting. That's all.
I'm glad you said that, Vicky, because you just reminded me there are certain products that are exempt from the EU CRA. Like, for example, automobiles. They have their own set of requirements and regulations over there that are distinct from the EU CRA. And so, if you are BMW, you don't have to worry about this, or Mercedes Benz, because you're going to be subject to some different regulations in the EU and not so much the EU CRA itself. But if you make refrigerators and and you're making them available on the EU market, you're probably going to have to get ready for the EU CRA expectations or requirements. So, but medical devices, like an X-ray machine, is excluded from the EU CRA because there are already separate regulations that cover those. So, thank you for saying that, Vicky. You reminded me about that. Anyone else that has any thoughts they'd like to share or questions? Vicky and I are here. We can help you with this.
I think the main reason that people are engaging, there's quite a lot of people who are engaging with this, and I'm not somebody that likes to read this kind of thing. This is not my bag at all. I'm not a policy or lobbyist or any of that thing, but everybody's trying to figure out where is the loophole that they can squeeze their product into so that they are either not subject or minimally subject. That's the reason people are looking at this ahead of time, is so they can figure out how to maybe reorganize their business or something. And also, if there's going to be significant cost that's going to change their business structurally. And this mostly applies to manufacturers that are incorporating a lot of software components that they didn't write, they have no control over. And there's the popularly something in excess of 90% of all software is open source software, and there's a lot of commercial software out there. So this is has the potential to affect a lot of products.
I hear some people, not a lot, but I do hear some people that are saying, "Oh, this is too big. They'll never get this over the finish line. We're just not even going to worry about it because it's never going to happen. It's a short timeline. They're not really ready yet." So I think there are some people who are betting that it's just not going to happen. I
Well,
think.
there's this sort of a parallel uh, legislation or requirement in the EU called NIS2, which is a requirement for network operators to report certain kinds of events. Anyway, it's kind of parallel, but this is like for ISP service providers. Anyway, in the EU Commission comes up with I forget the technical term, but a document like this. And then every country has to go and discuss within the country how they're going to turn it into a law within their country. And
Right.
I mean, we've got to agree between the House and the Senate. It's a hell of a lot more complicated over there. Anyway, NIS2 has been in force for, I don't know, maybe 2 whole years already. And there's some countries, most of the countries that still have not worked out the details. So that is lagging by quite a bit, more than a year. So that's, I think, why people are thinking the CRA is probably it's gonna not hit their planned schedule.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting, and I'm not a lawyer, but what I understand, the NIS2, I think they refer to that as a directive.
Yeah.
It's not a regulation. The EU CRA is a regulation. So apparently directives have a little bit more flexibility so that the individual European Union countries can make their decisions about complying with a directive. But a regulation, as I understand it, carries a lot more weight and a lot more force of law. So it's interesting. We don't know. Nobody knows. I mean, I think we're all just kind of watching and seeing what's going to happen. But thanks for bringing that out, Vicky, because there are differences. And again, if you're not subject to this, if you don't offer your products in the EU, you can rest assured that you have no problems. You're not going to have to worry about fines in euros. But if you are doing work in the United States for the U.S. government, they are in fact working very aggressively to get attestations and artifacts in and subject products to cybersecurity risk assessments before they'll be allowed to purchase and use software. So it's here in the U.S. already, just not broadly. Not it doesn't affect every product and every part of the economy the way the EU CRA does. But if you are selling to the U.S. government, there will be some expectations for certain cybersecurity requirements, which I can point you to that as well if you're really curious. So hopefully we didn't bore you too much, guys.
Oh, this is great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I while this is all new to me, I'm always curious with new regulations and how to be in compliance with it. So watching you present this definitely helps. Thank you.
You're welcome, Jason. Yeah, glad to do it. And it's so great. Vicky, hopefully you can join us when we have our next get together meeting at the Amherst Brewing there. That's a great opportunity for everyone to go out and have a little fun. So Robert usually arranges something at some point during the year. I'm not sure, is it any particular time, Robert, or is it
That
like
was the
Christmas
first
or
time
something?
in years, but we should do it again. It
It
was
was
fun.
fun. It was
Yeah.
great to meet everyone face to face. But if there's nothing else, guys, I'll just go ahead and give you back the rest of your night and say thanks for joining us. And Vicky, please, thank you for coming along. I appreciate you chiming in and helping set the record straight here.
Sure. Thanks for telling me about this. I didn't know about this meetup.
Yeah, they're a great group. I like hanging out with those guys up in Amherst. And you're not too far from up in there as well. You're in the area as well. And Robert,
yeah.
you're down in Connecticut, right?
I'm in Amherst.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, you're
Okay.
in it. Well,
Oh,
even better.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All
I'll
right.
stop the recording.